Hey, did you hear me? Hey, don't you walk away from me. Did you hear what I said? Don't you walk away. No! Yeah, you better.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am.
I don't understand. Why?
What do you mean? Wait a second, what are we doing? You said cross the line.
You've crossed the line if you're going to quit.
Oh. Do it again. I forgot the liquor stores close at 8.
A hero doesn't care if you're a bunch of scary alcoholic bums. Everybody! Everyone's a hero.
You're fired!
No, I'm not.
Oh, yes, you are! So you can take your Pulitzer and your beloved Underwood and your change of underwear and clear out.
Do you work for me?
Hi, how are you? I'm Mark, and I am, okay. So it's just me now, for the time being. I'm not saying there won't ever be another person sitting here with me, but for now, it's this is what you're stuck with. Show's still called the Cinemaniacs, plural. Not going to change that. Why? Because we are the Cinemaniacs. You and I, all of you out there. Not the person next to you, but you. I'm talking to you. Yeah, you think it's you I'm talking to. The Cinemaniacs. It's all of us. It's wonderful, isn't it? I have a whole bunch of things to talk about this week. Every one of them I've actually seen. First up is the new Disney animated film, sequel to a little film called Wreck-It Ralph. This time out, Ralph and his cute pixie friend go out of the arcade and online, on the line, as it were, in order to find a MacGuffin in Ralph Breaks the Internet. So what Wreck-It Ralph did for the world of arcade games, which is predominantly set in an arcade. You were inside the world of these arcade games as though they were little worlds unto themselves. This does for the internet. So basically, the plot, when I was watching the movie and I realized, this is actually the plot of this movie, isn't it? I don't even remember the name. I'm a little vague on names sometimes. The racing game that the little girl Sarah Silverman voices breaks down, and they need to get a new steering wheel for it. And the whole ticking clock threat thing in this movie is that that game is going to get unplugged in her little world, and probably she will disappear if they can't find a replacement steering wheel on eBay. So Ralph and the little girl, whose name I don't remember, they go online, on the line, into the internet to go to a physical manifestation of eBay in order to buy that steering wheel. And then they have to sort of find the money online. It's kind of an odd concept, but it works. So for what Ralph did, the first film, with video games and humor about video game isms and things like that, this does for the internet. It's pretty funny. It's pretty clever. It sort of highlights and mocks just the vast stupidity of things we waste our time with online, in some very clever ways, in some very obvious ways. Beautiful production design, like the first film, very pretty colors. As you know, I'm a sucker for pretty colors. This is another that I think would have, I saw it in 2D. It would probably benefit from seeing it in 3D. It would be cooler in 3D than it already is. Probably the highlight, a lot of people are saying, and I agree, is there's a sequence where the little girl stumbles upon, they go to Disney Online, and you see all the Disney princesses from the history of Disney films. So that's interesting, first of all, to see CGI, 3D, modern realizations of the classic Disney princesses like Snow White and Cinderella and things like that, Sleeping Beauty, and also to see how they interact with each other. It's very knowing, loving, and poking a little fun at the Disney-isms and those princesses. And it's only a few minutes total screen time for the ladies in this film, but they are utilized in a very cool and funny way toward the end. It's interesting to see this movie. So you can do a film where I'm going to use a search engine. It's called Floogle, and everybody in the audience goes, oh yeah, Google. It's always a tiny bit annoying, but a little amusing when they do that. This is a film that just uses brand names. So it's cool to see Google and Yahoo and Bing and all this other stuff and some made up names. But at the same time, I'm like, man, is this just like one huge commercial for all these other companies that are just putting their product and intellectual property in this film? It felt a bit like Ready Player One in many ways. where you have all these different characters. And because this is a Disney-produced film, and Disney owns not only the Disney characters, but they own the Marvel characters, and they own the Star Wars characters. You see a lot of Star Wars characters in this. I don't believe you see any Marvel characters in this film. So there's a lot of crossbreeding and things like that that's amusing and interesting. Voice cast is very strong. You have Gal Gadot as this female race driver in this online racing game that's sort of like a Grand Theft Auto kind of thing. It is comically dark and violent and depressing. And you have John C. Reilly back as Ralph and Sarah Silverman as the little girl, and Taraji P. Henson is this person who's in charge of their version of YouTube and things like that. And there's a lot of mocking of like YouTube trends and challenge videos and all that stuff. I thought it was very funny. The crowd I saw it with thought it was funny. I don't know that I think it's as good as the first one, but it's not the same thing as the first one all over again, which is pretty cool. It still does some, mocking of video games and things like that. And then there are cool little nuggets throughout the end credits, and there's a PS at the end of the film, very, very end of the film. So I would say it's worth staying until the very end of the credits. So Ralph Wrecks the Internet is out now. I think it is fine for all ages. I think it is one of those films that we always say, is it a kid's movie or a family film? I think this is more of a family film because as a theoretical adult, it operated on my level, and I thought it was fun and funny, and I think kids would probably get that too. So that's out now, and are you ready? Up next, we have the new film, this new sequel to a film from about a year or so ago, in which the son of legendary boxer Apollo, not going to say his name, no, this is a boxing movie, squares off against the foe who murdered his father in Creed 2.
It wasn't all about me.
It's not all about him, actually, which is in some ways good and in some ways not. So, Creed 2, a.k.a. Rocky 8, a.k.a. Rocky 4 Part 2. So I'm mixed on this one. I liked the previous Creed film. I thought was really well made and entertaining and compelling, but it was a remake of Rocky. This is what happens. This is what you get. I call them C-makes or requels. A movie is untouchable. You can't remake The Wizard of Oz. That's ridiculous. But we could do a prequel that's pretty much the same thing with younger and hotter people in it, and maybe that'll work. So Creed was essentially a Rocky remake, but the idea is that it's the son of Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers in the original films, and he's trying to, live up to his father's reputation and legacy and be a boxer on his own. He enlists Rocky Balboa to be essentially the Mickey character from Burgess Meredith's character from the Rocky films, and to be his trainer and confidant and all that. And for me, Creed was fine. It was a Rocky remake, but you got to see more Rocky. You got to see where the Rocky Balboa character is in his life 40 years after the original movie. So Creed 2 is a continuation of this. Now, I thought it was supposed to be a surprise what the real plot of this movie was, but okay, doing this show, I don't like to ever give away plot details. I feel like movies work best when you don't know what's coming next and it just washes over you in the order in which it happens. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this one, and it's not really much of a spoiler because you learn who's in this movie like in the opening shot of this film. So here's the deal. This story is about Dolph Lundgren's character from Rocky 4, still harboring a chip on his shoulder about losing to Rocky and the shame it brought to the Ivan Drago name in Russia, and the shame it brought to boxing in Russia, and the shame and the shame and the shame. So he has raised a son up filled with hate against Rocky and America, or Apollo Creed and all that. So basically, Ivan Drago's son is a big beefy boxer who wants to challenge Apollo Creed's son, and it's the sons, fighting their father's battles from long ago. This is Rocky 4 again, basically. Now, people love this movie. I thought it was entertaining. I saw it at a sold-out show in a big theater, and people were cheering, and they were along for the ride with this movie. So I'm not going to say it's not entertaining, and I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it. I just have a beef with us getting served the same things over and over again. And these movies that are seemingly written by not people who have lived a life and had experiences and drawn from history and culture and art and learned things in their life, but the movies seem to be written by people who have watched the same 5 most popular films of the last 20 years over and over and over again, and we just keep getting regurgitations of that. I wonder if the next Creed movie, he'll fight a guy with a mohawk. So basically the story is Adonis Creed is deciding whether or not he's going to accept the challenge from this angry Russian boxer whose father, killed Adonis Creed's father, and Rocky telling him not to do it and all that. And it follows a pattern structurally that's very similar to Rocky IV. The boxing scenes are really good. You feel it. You're right there on the edge of your seat. Well, it's a Rocky movie. You kind of know who's going to win, but it's executed in such a way that you feel for the struggle. There's a lot more Rocky in this movie. If you're coming for that, you are getting another Rocky movie. It's just that Rocky's not the boxer anymore. Although there is one point in the movie where I'm like, oh God, if Rocky looks down, sighs heavily, goes into the closet and opens a trunk and his old boxing shorts are in there and he decides he's going to fight Ivan Drago's son, then I'm going to pay twice to see this movie. But that doesn't happen, not to give anything away. Acting is good. I'm not a huge fan of the Adonis Creed character. I don't find him terribly compelling. He just seems like a guy with a chip on his shoulder. I think the Rocky stuff is a lot more compelling. I really wish these films would strike out on their own course. Not just copying what happened in the other films before them, but also not trading so heavily on the goodwill the audience has for a movie that's 30 years old. There's a triumphant moment in the film where the Rocky theme swells up, and it worked on me. I got a little misty, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm feeling this because I'm thinking about these other movies, not because of this one. This character should have his own theme. You shouldn't be trading on the goodwill of Rocky's theme. Rocky didn't do anything. Rocky's sitting off to the side watching this young guy beat somebody else up. This young guy should have his own theme that's memorable and music in the movie that's you're going to remember 20, 30 years later, unlike what's in this. And the whole Dolph Lundgren thing, everybody's excited because, he's Drago's back in the movie. And there's other characters that you see in this film that you don't expect. But it's only interesting, and it only means anything if you're a fan of Rocky IV. I really would love to know, movies@CheshireTV.org is the email address for us. I'm going to work on getting a graphic that comes up more often with that. If you saw this and you have never seen any Rocky movie, if you've never seen Creed, if you saw Creed 2 and you've never seen Rocky 4, I would love to know what all those moments meant to you. Like, did this movie do a good enough job of making that stuff matter? Or were you just like, who are these people and why should I care? There is a great scene in this film, way too short, kind of a missed opportunity, where Dolph Lundgren and Sylvester Stallone they meet for the first time since 1984 and they have a conversation. And I'm thinking, this is the movie that I want to see. I want to see these two guys who have a heavy history with each other, who have not seen or thought about each other much in the last couple decades, sitting down and having a conversation, and how would that go? That's what I love about the Cobra Kai show that's on YouTube Red. You have to pay $10, but it's quite worth it, which is the Karate Kid people coming back together after 30 or 40 years and 30 years. And what is that conversation like? So there's a little bit of that in this movie, but My Dinner with Drago would have been the film I would have preferred to see to this. So, okay, all of my hang-ups aside, I thought Creed 2 was good. Different director from the first one, so it didn't quite have some of the subtlety that the first one had, but ultimately, for me, it's another Rocky movie. I'm not sure how many more of these we're going to see. I'm not sure how much more Stallone will be involved. He actually stepped up and I think co-wrote this movie, which might explain why there's so much Rocky in it. But it was interesting. So that's all. I guess we'll go over there. The luxury of two cameras. So that's all that I saw in the theater this weekend. It actually isn't, but if we have time, I'll talk about the other thing I saw. I missed seeing Robin Hood. Wasn't really interested in seeing it, but I was going to, and missed seeing Robin Hood, and Widows has eluded my grasp. So we'll sort of see if we can get caught up. I'll talk about those when and if I can see them. If you saw Robin Hood or Widows, let me know what you thought, because to me, Robin Hood looks a little silly. Young, sexy Robin Hood. We get a couple new young, sexy Robin Hood every couple years. And Widows looked like it had potential, like it's an old heist movie or an old crime film from the 70s, which are two genres I like quite a bit. Now we will move on to home video. The home video format or service or device, if you will, of your choice. However you watch movies that aren't in theaters legally, we'll talk about that. First up is a film I thought I would hate. It stars John Cho, and it is about a man whose daughter suddenly disappears, and he takes to the internet to find out what has become of her and to race against time and hope that she is still alive while he is searching. So you know me, I don't like camcorder movies, I don't like cell phone movies, I don't like surveillance footage movies, I like movies that are shot and look like movies. So when I saw the trailer for Searching, which is basically like you're watching a computer screen, like you're standing behind somebody who's using a computer for 2 hours, I was like, yeah, no, I don't know. This is not something I need to support. But I went to see it. And one of the great strengths of doing this show is my expectations being thwarted, bad expectations being thwarted far more often than good expectations are. So John Cho, who people know from the Harold and Kumar movies and a lot of other stuff, is front and center. He's like the star of this movie. There are other people he interacts with. It's all through FaceTime and video chats online. This film is done as though he is sitting at his computer. It's like you're looking at his computer screen, which again sounds like it would get tedious real fast, but it doesn't. This is so compelling. It's amazing. I'll say, if you're trying to do research right now in this modern era in which we live, chances are you're going to be sitting at a computer doing it. Now, if you were shooting this narratively, like I always insist films exist, you would be a whole lot of footage of a guy with a furrowed brow, lit by the glow of his computer screen, and then him tapping on a keyboard from over his shoulder. It would be boring as anything. This movie is never boring for a second. And it unfolds. It's not quite real time. I think it's over the course of a couple of days. But it's always interesting. It's basically a detective thriller in a sense. You see how somebody uses modern tools of internet, online, publicly available research for the most part to figure out, the truth behind what his daughter's been doing lately. And then you have a couple of extra characters. You have his brother, and you have a couple of her school friends, and you have his daughter's school friends, and you have Deborah Messing as a police officer who's aiding him in the search, or he's aiding her in the search. And it all plays out fairly realistically. A lot of the things I don't like about found footage films is that they feel, if anybody's acting, it really feels like acting. The dialogue tends to feel really written when it's supposed to not feel written, and none of that was the case here. And this is something you'll never hear me say, unless they make another movie as good as this, about this. I'm never going to say this. I shouldn't say it out loud. This is a movie that is really best viewed on a computer, because that's what this looks like. This feels like you're sitting down at a computer watching this. So I saw it in the theater, and I thought it was very compelling and really good. But I would actually recommend that you watch this on a laptop or a PC or Mac or whatever, and not on a TV, because it really feels, that would make it feel even more realistic than watching it on a TV screen. John Cho is really good in this. He's strong. The whole movie rests upon his performance, and he comes off quite well. The film feels fairly realistic and accurate. A lot of times found footage stuff has to bend over backwards to make it give you a reason why the camera is still rolling and why the people don't just run. Usually they're horror movies. This feels pretty accurate. It gets a little silly, maybe one point toward the end as to when it gets revealed exactly what happened and who's behind it, but otherwise, searching is really good. And again, this is one of those films that it's going to fall through the cracks. There's no giant marquee value star. There's no title. It's very memorable, but I would highly recommend searching for it. Sorry. Up next, here's a film I saw in the theater that hardly played anywhere, and probably will not make much of an impression on video, but let's talk about it anyway. Dom Nahal. He's the red-haired guy who screams a lot and is sort of like Peter Cushing in the new Star Wars movies. How about that? You'll recognize him. He's in every third film. Domhnall Gleeson stars as a man who goes to a country estate to help settle the affairs of a very old, tired, and sickly family, and he meets, unfortunately, the little stranger. So when I went to see this in the theater, I saw this in Pennsylvania on one of my weekends, back when MoviePass still worked. The marquee letters were not arranged quite right, so I went in blind, and I assumed this was a film about a cowboy, The Littlest Ranger, and then I found out it was something else, so weak. This is a very atmospheric ghost story, British ghost story. Reminds me of the Ghost Story at Christmas that the BBC did for years and years, which is where The Woman in Black was first realized for the screen, that was later remade as a Nuevo Hammer film with Daniel Radcliffe, which was quite good. So this is a very, very atmospheric, big rooms, old house, quiet, slow-moving, good British acting, great sense of time and place. I love a movie that takes place in a big old house or a big location where you are just in that location often enough that you almost feel like you could find your way around there if you were beamed into that space. Cast is very good. You have Ruth Wilson, Charlotte Rampling, and Domhnall Gleeson. I'll ask him someday how he says that. And it's a slow burner. So I had seen this trailer and I assumed, it's going to be spooky ghost stuff. We're going right out of the gate, we're going to have some ghost stuff. Well, it doesn't really start doing its thing until the last 15 or 20 minutes of this movie. I didn't mind when I saw the film. I realized, okay, so the ghost stuff is going to be subtle. And at one point I wondered, well, maybe it isn't even a ghost movie. Maybe it was mismarketed. It is kind of a supernaturally thing, but it's really mostly at the end of the film. Unfortunately, when I saw it in the theater, as I usually say, it was dark, it was quiet, and I was a little tired. So I was starting to get a little bit dippy before the ghost stuff happened and as the ghost stuff was happening. So I'm not 100% that I ever saw how this film got resolved, but I thought it was good. It's that kind of ghost story movie like Ghost Story or The Changeling, where something kind of bad happens in the past, in an era where you don't really think about bad things happening. So it makes it all the more like perverse and creepy that it's happening in such a cultured and regal estate. So I thought it was good. I think if you like British TV, if you like, dare I say masterpiece theater, why, I don't know. If you like British stuff and classy stuff and slow burn ghost stories, it's definitely worth a look. It's not as good as the others, which I would highly recommend, or The Woman in Black, either version I would recommend. Or if you can find the old BBC Ghost Story at Christmas, like Whistle and I'll Come to You and things like that. Those are out there on, I don't think they're available in this country, but Region 2 DVDs you can get it. They may be online for streaming too. So that is The Littlest Ranger. Up next is, a film that was very popular in theaters and now on video. This actually came out, this and the next couple came out last week. I was just blabbing too much to fit them in, but here we go with some catch-up. They're going to be on video forever, so what the heck. We have an all-star cast. No, we don't. We have an all-star cast maybe if you live in another country. We have a very big star, as far as I'm concerned, with Michelle Yeoh as the uptight, disapproving, highly judgmental, rich mother of a young man who is bringing his girlfriend for the first time to meet his family. That girlfriend doesn't know they're the richest family in Singapore, and she's a little taken aback with the culture shock and the class shock and the shocky shock and how to deal with all of these crazy rich Asians. Sorry, doing a little research here. It's not working, it's not fast enough. Nope, okay, fine. So, the Paul Feig movie that came out that had the two ladies, and I can't remember the name of it. Well, you know, see, it's all improv, folks. I don't know everything. Anyway, Henry Golding is the guy I was thinking of. He was in this other movie recently, so you might have seen him in that. Those are the two things I know him from. It was the film with, I can't remember everybody's name. Scratch that. You never heard of it. You never heard any of this. So anyway, this movie was a lot of fun. This is another trailer that I saw, and I thought, ooh, this looks like not a movie for me. This looks like a movie that is just glorifying the glitzy, glamorous lifestyle and reality show kind of life that I find kind of repulsive. Not the life, but those shows. And it's not. It's Fish Out of Water. It's just an average, normal person played by Constance Wu who is thrust into this bizarre to her world where, like, I don't belong here. And you have her sassy friend, and the sassy friend is a character in film that I really hate, and she was actually kind of funny and not that bad. Ken Jeong is in it, who I love. He wasn't as sharp as he usually is, but he was still funny, and his whole family is funny. And it's just, this movie is gorgeous to look at. Part of it is it's an area that is exotic in the world to me. Part of it is just the ornate, I'm going to say palaces, but the ornate interiors that you see, and the clothes and all this other stuff. So maybe it worked for me and all the reasons why I don't like those reality shows. It's very funny, it's very touching at times, and it's cool to see Michelle Yeoh in such a huge mainstream role that's not an action movie. Now, she's been making movies since the 80s, and I know she does a lot of non-action stuff now, but she won my heart as Jackie Chan's sidekick in Police Story 3, Super Cop, and most people know her probably from Crouching Tiger, but then she went on to she has a bit role in the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie, probably bigger in the next one. She was in the new Star Trek series. She was in Danny Boyle's Sunshine, so she's been in all kinds of stuff that's not action, but it's really cool to see her just as an actress in a movie, and it's certainly a movie that's done this well, and I heard she got a development deal out of this, so she'll be doing even more high-profile stuff, which is fantastic. She's a nice lady and deserves it. So who is this movie for? I think probably the ladies will be more attracted to this than the men, but I'm theoretically, well, no, definitely, gender-wise, a man, and I really enjoyed it, and the lady I went with really enjoyed it, and everybody in the theater seemed to enjoy it, and it's a really popular film, so I think it's worth a look. If you hate it, it's not my fault. So now, speaking of Asians, I don't know that there are any in this film. This is a film about a young boy who is on the run with a brother who's on the run from some criminals, and the difference from all of the other people on the run from criminals movies and family bonding stories that you've probably seen is that this kid has a space laser gun. And the people chasing them, in addition to criminals, are space laser people. And this film is entitled Kin. So this is a film that was based on a short film that's, I think, still out there. If you poke around on YouTube, you can find it. And you can sort of tell if that was the seed of an idea, where this kid is playing in this abandoned building, I think in Detroit, and he finds this weird looking gun, and he squeezes off a shot, and it's a laser gun. And then, where does he go and do things from there? So the story is young African-American boy, adopted son of Dennis Quaid and a now deceased wife. Dennis Quaid's natural son is a guy who just got out of jail, and he's on the skids, and he's trying to settle up some debts with some people he owes money to, either from when he was in jail. And so it's a family drama. It's a really good family drama that, frankly, they didn't need the laser gun in this movie. It's really funny. I was watching this, and I'm thinking, man, I keep forgetting that there's this whole laser gun and these perhaps aliens tried to reclaim it, because the story between these two brothers and the father and the criminals and the stripper with a heart of gold they pick up, played by Zoe Kravitz, on the road is compelling enough. The laser gun is just, it's cool. The laser gun is like, they get in trouble and they're like, and that's cool. Put a laser gun in every movie. A laser gun in Kung Fu in every movie, and I'm okay. So it's a compelling drama. It's good. The action is good. The sci-fi element is interesting and intriguing. And I thought this was a really good movie. It hardly played anywhere. Again, it's one of those titles that's not compelling. And I'm still using the old video store terminology. There's nobody on the box cover you recognize. I don't know how people stumble across movies anymore, other than to have people tell them they should go see it, or if it pops up in the splash page of Netflix. But Kin is really good. This angles hard for a sequel. I thought the only stumbling or failing in the movie is what happens at the end, which I'm not going to give away. But if you run into me on the street or send me an email, movies@cheshiretv.org, I'll tell you about it. It's one of those things that a lot of movies do. It makes me kind of roll my eyes and go, oh, it's one of these stories again. I'm sure it's part of a trilogy. But that aside, up to that final moment, I thought this movie was really cool and compelling, and it's good on multiple levels. It's probably not for kids, even though it's got a kid as a protagonist and it's sort of a child fantasy. There's stuff with violence and nastiness and darkness and a strip club and all that stuff, so it's probably not for young kids. I would say, teenagers and up, and certainly adults. I thought it was really good. That is Kin. Up next, so I remember all my life this movie. Nicolas Cage stars in the newest film by Panos Cosmatos, son of George Cosmatos, who made Cobra, a favorite Stallone 80s flick of mine. This is the story of Panos Cosmatos also did Beyond the Black Rainbow. If you know that movie, that gives you a kind of an inclination as to what you're in for with this one. Nicolas Cage plays a guy who lives out in the woods with his girlfriend, and then weird, bizarre, devil, Hellraiser-type cultists come to their house and do very bad things and kidnap the girlfriend, and it is up to Cage alone to set out to avenge the kidnapping of and find Mandy. So, we discuss family films and children's films. This is neither of those. This is one for the grown-ups. For certain grown-ups, this is a revenge movie, basically. This is a vigilante revenge kind of film. It's coming from the director of Beyond the Black Rainbow, which was very strange and very stylish and had that throwback 80s feeling synth score. This has more of that kind of odd music score that's, it doesn't, people are like, oh, it's a totally 80s score. Well, it's not. It's a score inspired by films. Films in the 80s didn't use scores the way the films that are trying to emulate 80s scores do now. It's more of like a amplification or on steroids kind of 80s synth score. Anyway, this movie's really weird. This isn't one for everybody. It's extremely violent. It's got very disturbing imagery. It's very offensive to some in very many ways. And it's a revenge movie. Nicolas Cage's lady gets taken away and had bad things done to her, and he decides to take out the people who did it. And it's weird. It's this biker gang that looks like they walked out of Hellraiser. And are they supernatural? Are they not? Ultimately, that's answered, but not satisfactorily to me. And then it's like this Manson-like weird cult that's up there in the Pacific Northwest, and they've kidnapped the girl and all this other stuff. So it's Nicolas Cage basically just slashing and burning literally slashing and burning his way through the bad guys to find out to get to the top dog. I thought it It was too long. It was pretty weird, but I don't mind weird. Visually very interesting at times, but other times I'm just like, okay, yeah, fine. You're using animation. Wonderful. Can we move the story forward, please? I didn't have a lot of patience for this. I thought it was kind of pretentious and kind of a wank, to be honest. But there's a lot of people who really love it. So it depends on your taste and what you're into. Cage is weird and crazy, and Nicolas Cage. And some people like that. I find it kind of tedious and tiresome. It's like, okay, great. He's showing his teeth and screaming. That's fine. Could we move forward, please? So I didn't really like Mandy very much. I like Beyond the Black Rainbow more. That was a bit more subtle and obtuse. This one just wasn't really satisfying to me. By the time he was really taking these guys apart, I had lost interest and I just wanted to move on. Partly it just was how it was shot, and partly it just wasn't very interesting to me. So Mandy is now out for your edification, or whatever bigger word than that you want to use for it. Now we're going to go to the older films that I like to talk about. Retro Corner, we have the Arrow Video Corner, that's later. First up is a new 4K remaster of the 1979 Lucio Fulci classic, that's Classick, which was a knockoff, unofficial sequel to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, about what happens when the dead rise on a Caribbean island and only a few people are there to attempt to stop it or even survive, in a little nugget entitled Zombie. So this is one that's it's huge among horror fans. It is Lucio Fulci, who a lot of people love, and I think was a hack and mostly made movies that were really not very well made, but they just have a lot of gore and good soundtracks. So what we have here, I'm going to show it to you because I've got one. Are we getting glare on that? This is a 4K restoration from Blue Underground, new edition. This movie's come out a million times. This, I don't know if you can see it, but the zombie face, it's lenticular and worms shoot out the eye. Sorry, Grandma. And there's also a version, there's a couple different covers. There's one with a woman who gets something put in. It's very ocular trauma, these covers. There's another lenticular where a woman reenacts a very famous scene from the movie where she gets a little bit of an eye ache. So the story is very simple. It's a boat shows up with nobody alive on it in New York's harbor, and they trace it back to this island where Richard Johnson is sort of this scientist trying to figure out why the dead are rising on this Caribbean island. It's sort of a throwback to like the voodoo zombie kind of thing. It's got that kind of feel to it. Mia Farrow's sister Tissa Farrow is the star with Ian McCulloch. They're the sort of protagonists, and Richard Johnson, who you might remember from one of my favorite movies, the original Haunting, is the other star. And it was made by Italians, so the whole thing is dubbed. It was shot on this island, and a little bit of New York City location footage, which is kind of cool. You get late 70s New York. And this was a movie that I never liked. I always thought it was just not very well made and kind of bland, and gore for gore's sake, zooming in on the gore. It's always seemed really cheesy. And it really wasn't until I watched this copy that I felt like, this movie's kind of fun. Maybe I finally come to terms with what it is, where it's nothing deep and it's nothing great and it's not horrifically well made, but it's got a great score by Fabio Frizzi. It's gory at times, which is fun. It's got really good atmosphere, and it's a good time. So this edition is 3 discs. It's the complete score. It's on a CD. It's the newly remastered, which looks gorgeous. It looks like it was shot yesterday, movie. Tons of extras, multiple commentaries, a whole other disc of extras. If you love Zombie, throw away your other editions. This is the one to get. Blue Underground has been really, really good over the years about keeping this movie and a lot of other Italian genre stuff in the marketplace in America, and really, really nice looking presentations and good extras. And you got to thank Bill Lustig, director of Maniac, for loving these films and keeping them maintained to this great degree. So that is out now, and it's wow. I got this and I'm like, I'm gonna get rid of that copy. And I watched the movie and I'm like, wow, I kind of like Zombie now. Who'd have thought? People do change. Up next is what used to be Tom's favorite portion of the show. Well, we're going to be right here. It's the Arrow Video Corner. Oh, we have a film which, again, who'd have thought, but Arrow put it out. This is one of the last films of Robert Altman. This is a crazy all-star cast, and the story of what goes on upstairs and downstairs in an English mansion in the 1930s or 40s, I believe, and intrigue and melodrama abound at Gosford Park. So, hi, how are you? A little confusion, but that's fine. I live in it. I live in a fog of it. This is a film that I had seen on video probably when I'm more comfortable over here. Hey, how are you? This is a film that I saw on video when it first hit video, and I shut it off. I thought, oh, this is boring and nothing's happening, and it's this mumbly, hard to understand, poorly recorded British dialogue. And I don't know what I was thinking, because I popped it in the other day to watch this new edition, this Arrow edition, and this movie's fast. This had me from the opening moments. It's all of these people are arriving at this country estate for a hunting party or a shooting party on the weekend, and you have an American, you have Ivor Novello, who is a real person. You have an American studio executive who makes Charlie Chan movies, and then you have all these various people and their servants. And this film is really mostly about the servants. And there was a whole series called Upstairs, Downstairs that was done in England for years on TV. It's this whole other world that exists below the regular house, where there are, it's all about the class, levels of class and the class system, even within the servants. All the servants are called by the name of the person they work for downstairs. It's really, really interesting. So just that aspect alone I thought was fascinating. And then you get the interplay with the elite upstairs, and then how they interact with the servants. The cast is amazing. It's Helen Mirren, it's Alan Bates, it's Derek Jacobi, Michael Gambon, Bob Balaban, Kelly MacDonald, Kristen Scott Thomas. I mean, I could spend the rest of the time I have left just telling you who's in this movie. They're all good. And the movie goes along for a while, and it's very interesting with just how all of this social structure works. And then somebody gets killed, and then it becomes a murder mystery. And then oh, hey, this is even more interesting now. And then Stephen Fry shows up as a police inspector who doesn't seem terribly interested in solving the murder. He's very funny. So it's good drama. I mean, it's also really funny. It's nicely shot. This new HD version looks great. The extras on this, I think, are mostly ported over from the previous versions. A lot of them are 4:3 SD, which is fine. Don't squash it, don't stretch it. And a lot of times when you have something that's released in the DVD era, there's already a lot of extras, especially when you have a movie like this where Robert Altman, who's the big name creatively attached to this, has passed away. You're not going to get new content out of him. Anyway, it's really good. It's out now from Arrow. I've talked too much. I'm Mark, and this is the Cinemaniac. Bye.